This is Gemara Shavuos Daf Chof Vav, and we're holding on. Chof Hey Amid Beis. We are middle of the wide lines, middle of a lengthy Shakavataria, about 7 lines down. Amar Lahu Abaye responding back to the Rabbanan. Tarti Loi Matzitu Amrit, says Abaye. Tarti Lo Matzitu Amritu. Cannot say that you have to bring 2 karbanos when one has a shvua regarding eidos that is not truthful. Titania, we learned in a brayso. 1 second, what happened to our highlighting? Titania, the first word online. La'achas meila, says the Torah. For one of these, from here we learn out. La'achas atamachayv, you're chayv for one. V'atamachayv v'ishtayim. But Bezdin will only obligate you to bring 1 carbon, but not 2. So ask Zavaya, according to you, what you, the Rabbanan, said, it would come out that you're obligated to bring 2. Explains the Gemara. Ule Abaye, but responds the Gemara, according to Abaye, for what reason did the Torah remove the Shvuas Eidos from a Shvuas Bitoy? Why over here does it not say Vinelam? Why regarding a Shvuas Eidos is the word Vinelam not used Chayev in order to teach us that one is obligated al Mezid Ke Shoigig? And that's the reason why the Torah singles out a Shvuas Bitoy, Shvuah of Eidos, because it's the only time that a carbon oil yared would be brought for a mezid, like a shogig. Of course, a mezid usually does not obligate the same carbon. Usually, no carbon at all for a mezid. Maybe there's an obligation, but it's only one. And b'shogig is when there is the extra chiyuv. Explains the Gemara, no. Amr leho lav hainu damri is not what they says. La'achas. La'achas ad machayv v'yata machayv shtayim. Only chayiv 1, inam machayv 2. V'i b'mezid mi katarti. But if it's a mezid, it'll never be 2. And therefore, we're back to square one. Why do we need a pasuk over here? So Rava Amar. So Rava comes along and gives us a different teretz. Says Rava 4 lines. Levan mishav navidavar shebechlal. You have to lead them b'davar achadosh. Ein lecha boy ela chidushay bilvad. Only has its chidush. That is Rava. Says the Gemara Mechlal. From here we can infer that Abayi savar isa l'shvua. Ba'ilam a shvaya Abayi seemingly is going to hold. Though when one makes a shvua, he does not know eidos. It's true that we need a pasuk to show that you only bring 1 carbon. But Abaye says, Eidos. Someone says to his friend, they make a shvua that I know Eidos v'ishtakach, and what happens was, it comes out to loyad he did not know Eidos. The potter, why is he potter? Because lemaisa, it's not going to be in the future, therefore it's not going to be in the past. Explains the Gemara, you're right, but Hadr Abaya Meahi Abaya was Chayzer. V'Baisema, second Darius, as we turn over to Chavav Amid Aleph, Chadaminayu, one of them wasn't Abaya at all, was rather Rav Papa Amar. Rav Papa said one of them, and that's the reason why, that's how we're going to answer up the stira in Abaye. We continue at the 2 dots to the very top of Chavav Amid Aleph, Vishmal Aimer. He says Rabbi Yishmael, you only chayav a carbon if you were over in a shvuas bitoy with regard to la'aseh lava, but not la'shavar. Things that are positive and negative. How do we know? A shvua, they can't be utilized both in the positive and negative. In the future, ha'adam b'shvua. Divi Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Shmuel Omer, no. Lahara lahaitiv. Lahara lahaitiv. Lahara lahaitiv lehaba. That when it says lahara lahaitiv, that is going in the future, says Rabbi Yishmael. Amr le Rabbi Akiva responds, no, Mkein ainli ela dvarim sheyish ben atava v'harava. Dvarim sheyish ben atava v'harava. Nayin, how do we know things that lemaisa do not involve things that are doing toiv or ra, good and bad? Amr le, meribe akosov, from the extra psukim. Amar loyim riboy akasav lekach, riboy akasav lekach. Well, just because the extra psukim, Shabbat comes Rabbi Akiva Yishmael. So it says the Gemara Rabbi Akiva, it's a good taina to Rabbi Yishmael. So what does Rabbi Yishmael respond? Amar Rabbi Yechon Rabbi Yishmael, sheshimish es Rabbi Nechunya ben Akana, sheyaderish es kolo teira kula bechlalu prat, iu nami derish bechlalu prat. No, where it comes from that he's in a darish shenit bechlalu prat, and that's how he's going to answer up the kasha in the kashas. Whereas Rabbi Akiva, Sheshimi says Nachum Ishkamzu, Sheyadarish is called like Torah Kula B'Riba Yumiyot, Yunami Derish Riba Yumiyot. So it comes out we have two different divergent approaches over here. We have Rabbi Yishmael with Shimish of Nechonia ben Akana of Klal Prat. Rabbi Akiva Shimish Nachum Ishkamzu Riba Yumiyot. Says the Gemara, my Rabbi Akiva the Darish Riba Yumiti. What is this Rabbi Akiva that you're telling me that Darshin Riba Yumiyot? On the last narrow line, moving over to the first medium-sized line, explains the Gemara, Nefesh ki sishba riba. The pasuk says that a soul who makes a shvuah, that's a riba, that's an expansive statement. Lahara leitim miyot, that specifies, that's a limiting statement. Riba akol comes to include everything. My riba. Riba called mili. Umay miyah, what does it exclude? Miyah tvar mitzvah. For Rabbi Yishmael, Darish Klalu Prat, how I nevesh ki sishba levat v'sayin klal. And of course, you're going to see that the nuance of a difference between riba and miyah and klalu prat is very similar. Riba is expansive, klal is general. Miyah is limiting, prat is a detail. So says Rabbi Yishmael, excuse me, nefesh kisish v'alavat v'sayim ze klal. L'har leitiv is a prat. L'choshev ata adum chazer v'klal. Klal u'prat klal yadon eklena prat. Ma prat mifurash lehaba. Af kol haba lehaba. Ahani klali lasui afilu dvarim she'ein b'hem harav atava. So the klal comes on to include even things which don't have a toiv and ra. Lehaba. Hani prati, but the prat comes muti afilu dvarim she'ein harav atava. Lishe Avar. So says the Gemara, that's going to be the machlekes Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva. So says the Gemara, Eibachana, should we switch around? That's what we're saying. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, no. Temi de lahar lahate mi she'isurai. Shabal yachal devarai. Yatzazu she'nisur mishabal yachal devarai. So rather, what's the Isra? Mishabal sishakru. You shouldn't say shaker. Rabbi Yitzchak, Avin Amar Kra. Oy nefesh ki sishava levat zay misha shvua kedemes lebitoi lo shabitoi kedemes leshvua yotza zeh achalti v'achalti shamayse kodim leshvua tan rabbanan adam b'shvua bra lo ines v'nela mitzra lemeiz mimenu shenizal mimenu shvua yochel shenizal mimenu chavis avlam shavua v'nela v'ale elem shvua u'chiyav v'nachayim v'ala chavis that the chiyav shvua is only going to come for the halama, for the forgetting, for the lack of knowledge, the concealment with regard to the shvuah, now with regarding to the chayfetz. On the first very wide line says the Gemara, Amar Mar Ha'adam b'shvuah praloines ichidami k'derav kahana v'ravasi gavikaimi makmi deramari Amar shvuah sadachi Amar Rav Umar Amar shvuah sadachi Amar Rav I saw her falsely. It's only on the lama of the shvuah. Continues the Gemara. They laughed about this in the West. Says the Gemara in Eretz Yisrael. We could have a shvuah without a chayfetz going to Amar. He says, I'm making a shvuah that I will not eat wheat bread, and he thought later that what happened, Uksavar Shachal Kamar, and he thought that he made a shvua that he will eat. The shvua Sa'inshi, because here he forgot what was the shvua. Chevsa Dachir, but he remembered that he made a shvua about wheat, about bread, excuse me. He just didn't remember was it a shvua positive or not to eat or not to eat. Says the Gemara, what is the possibility of a chayvetz without a shvua? He says, I'm making a shvua that I will not eat wheat bread. And he thought that he made a shvua about barley bread. The shvua sadachli, remember he made a shvua. Chevsa inchi, excuse me, shvua sadachli chevsi inchi. He remembers the shvua, but he forgot chevsa inchi, but forgot that which item he made the shvua on. Kiva the chevsi inchi lo hanu helam shvua. That would be case of a helam shvua. So Ela Amar Rav Elazar David Achasi. They're both the same. They're both the case of helam shvua. There's no such thing as the helam chayfet. Maski if lo Rav Yosef. So Rav Yosef comes along. Rav Elazar just finished saying that David Achasi. It's all a case of helam shvua. Asked Rav Yosef, "Chayfet b'lo shvua lo mishkachas lo." You're telling me there's no case of chayfet out of shvua. V'al mishkachas lo, but I'll tell you there is a case. He says, sure, I'm not going to eat wheat bread. He put his hand into the basket to take barley bread. And lo and behold, wheat bread came into his hand. And Lamaisa, he thought that it was barley bread, so he ate it. You remember it's the shvua, but chefsa. He doesn't know anything about the chefsa. So, Frakter of Yosef, we have a case of knowing about the shvua and not knowing about the chayfetz. Amar le Abaye, klom chayves le carbon, klom chayves le carbon, ella amai de tafes biyadai. Responds and answers Abaye, no. You are making him chayiv to bring a carbon only that which is in his hand. Helam shvuo. He says, you're right. It's almost like a name game here. We found the case that involves a chayfetz. But says Abaye, it's good it found a chayfetz, but Saif Kol Saif, what was the halama? What did he not know? What was concealed? It was the shvua. He did not know that he couldn't eat that type of bread. And therefore, they're both going to be sticky with Rav Elazar David Achasi. It is a case of a helam shvua. Lishnachrino. Amar le Abaye le Rav Yosef Saif. Carbon the kamikaivis Allah, the kamaisis Allah. The haipas. Saif says Abaye to Rav Yosef. Carbon the kamaisis Allah the haipas. Miyaz helam shvui. Again, a similar lashon that the carbon that you're machayev is the fact doesn't know about the shvua. Rav Yosef Amar lecha no kim chiyadol the chitin uparish minay. Since he knew it was chitin and he didn't eat it. Therefore, Helem Chayfet too. That's why Rav Yosef Lamaisa held this is a case of Helem Chayfes. Says the Gemara, Boi Mine, 3 lines to the bottom, Rav Miriam. Helem Zev Yadama. What is going to be a case in which he does not know either? There's a halama, a concealment of both the Shvua and the Chayfes. Amr Le, Ari Helem Shvua Biyadai. V'chayiv. V'nachman says, there's a helam shvua, and he's chayiv to bring a carbon. Adrabah, meaning if you don't know either, included in not knowing either is helama shvua, so you're chayiv. Frakti Gemara bag. No, adrabah. Helam chayivetz biyadayu pater. Amar Rav Ashi Chasina and imach was shvua kapar shari helam shvua biyadayu v'chayiv imach was chayivetz kapar shari helam chayivetz biyadayu pater. The same Yisrael we keep on falling back to. Why and what detail, what lack of knowledge was there? How do you know what lack of knowledge was there? By asking a fundamental question. If you knew this, what would have stopped you? Is it the fact that you knew the chayfetz, the fact that you knew the shvua? And ask Ravina Nachamol, it's intertwined. What does that mean? It's because of the chayfetz, it's because of the shvua. It's one and the same. Ella, loishna, there's no difference. So says the Gemara, in both of these cases, In both these cases, it's going to be the same level of halama. He forgot the chayfetz, he forgot the shvua, and therefore there'll be no carbon oil of yirid. As we turn over to Chavav Amid Aleph, Ezi Shiga Shvua Bito L'Shavar. Moving along to a new type of shvua, a new type of carbon. What is a shvuas bitoy l'shavar? So what is going to be the case? How can we have a case of a shoygeg that it's going to be l'shavar in the past? Whether you knew it's amazing, you didn't know it's a aynis. He knows that the shvu is aser. He just didn't know, is there a chi of carbon? So that will be, it was a shoygeg with regard to the shvuas bitu, and that's going to be the case. He's chayiv the carbon of the yirid. As the Gemara Keman, this fits with munbaz, which we saw back in the Gemara in Shabbos, Tamashikas carbon, Shema Shkaga. That a lack of knowing the carbon that you're going to be in machayiv, just that detail is enough of a lack of knowledge. Just again, nachamal, not knowing which carbon, that's going to be enough to create the chiyuv. Explains the Gemara, no, I'll tell you, no, and I can't love the Rabbanan like the Mumbaz. When did the Rabbanan argue on Mumbaz? El b'chol ha'torah kula, why? To lav chiddush aval hacham. But Davka over here, say the Rabbanan back to Mumbaz with regarding a carbon, the chiddush the kol ha'torah kula ha'shechan and lav the maisi carbon. That in the kol ha'torah kula we do not find a negative commandment without kares that you bring a carbon. The alfina may avodah zarah, as we generally learn out from avodah zarah. V'halcha, yet over here we find the lav without kares that bring carbon. I feel a Rabbanan might, even the Rabbanan would be might in this case. There would be such a carbon. This would be a shiga shvuas bitoy l'shavar, not only according to Mumbaz, even the Fida Chachamim. Ba'imine Ravina me Rava. 8 lines from the wide lines. Nishval kikar mistaken aleo mau. Someone made a shvuah not to eat a loaf of bread, and it was a sakana for him not to eat it. Mau, what's the halacha when he goes and eats that bread? Mistakan lishulei. Mistakan, if it became a sakana, lishalamar, should you make it mutter from lishalamar? It should become mutter. So it's not that you were over in your shvuah. He didn't eat it as a violation of his shvuah. He ate it because it was sakana's davashais. Says me, you're right, it wasn't a sakana. Ela mitztaer. He was very hungry. He was in tsar v'achla. Pshiga shvuas mai. Is this a shoygeg that bring a carbon? Amar le tanina shavi diasay, maybe carbon al shigasay, le shavi diasay, maybe carbon al shigasay. If you did shuva, if you would refrain from doing it as a result of his knowledge that it's aser, that's when you bring a carbon. So in this case, he wanted to eat the bread on his own volition. He desired to eat the bread. Therefore, there would be no carbon. Amar Shmuel, says Shmuel, Gamar beliba tzarach she'yotzi b'sfasaf. Someone thinks something is hard, that's not enough, he has to articulate it with his mouth. Shenamar levate b'svasayim. Anaya din of Shmuel, that there's only ever going to be an isser if it's a bitu b'svasayim, you utter it with your lips. Shenamar levate b'svasayim. Says the Gemara, 1 second. Meisvei frak the Gemara. Meisvei b'svasayim v'loy b'leiv gamar b'liboy minayim. For the fact that the pasuk says b'svasayim, it shows us to be with your lips and not with your heart, not with your mind. But gamar b'liboy, how do we know it could work? Talmud Leimar says the pasuk chol sheivate adam b'shvuah. So what do we see? Asks the Gemara on Shmuel that we see a brisa that explicitly, and perhaps we'll see in a second, even too explicitly, but explicitly says that there could be a chi of Shmuel, even if it's not lisfasav. Frag the Gemara back, 1 second. Hagufa kasha, the second white line we just said is a stira. Amir b'svasayim v'lo believe. You have to articulate. V'hadir amir, then you say Gamar believe I mean, this pasha makes no sense. Amar Rav Sheisher Zaloi Kasha Achikam Bisvasayim V'lo Shegamar B'li B'loitzi Bisvasav V'lo Haitzi. Bisvasayim means not that you wanted to articulate and you didn't, you have to actually articulate. But what if it's one step lower? Not that you actually wanted to articulate, but rather, Gomar belibo stam minayin tamlam l'chashevate. Okay, Gavaldik. So we figured out the brisa. Ela Shmuel kasha. So says the Gemara, but the kasha to Shmuel, and on that the Gemara concludes. Amar Rav Sheishes Teretz ve'im ahachi. Explain as follows. Beis v'asayim lo shkam belibo like zibas. That what is misvasayim? What does your mouth mean? That you have to actually say what you wanted to say. Not that you meant to say wheat and you said barley or vice versa. Now what if you didn't actually want to say wheat and you said barley? You thought about saying wheat, a one step lower. And then you just said bread stam. On that, that's how Shmuel will learn the brayse, and it's not a kasha to him. Meisvei, frakti Gemara, Moshe Zechadishmar. Ve'asisa, says the Torah, observe and perform that which your mouth says. And the Elish Oitzi Bizvahasa, you actually articulate it with your mouth. Kamar Beliba Minayim, I don't know, there could be Belay, time like we're called in the Says the Gemara. So what do we see? We see that even when it's Kamar Beliba, not like Shmuel. Answers the Gemara. Shiny Yasel says, "Kol nediv leiv v'nigma minei misham navi truma v'kachim shnei ksuba kechad." Says the Gemara, you're right, but only over there by truma and kachim. Why? Because ksuba kechad im lamdin. Ani lamdin lamdin make lamemer. Have chulin v'kachim chulin mukdashin. Chulim meikachim have chulin v'kachim chulin meikachim like garminos. Either it shakes you by echad, or it's the fact you can't learn out from kachim. But Seifkel Slave, we do not have a kasha on Shmuel. Concludes the Gemara. We'll pick it up from the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin b'siyata dishmaya.